Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to MoDXtra Games and Collectibles. Time for another collective thought of the day. This is where I go freestyling it, loosey-goosey, using my phone and my portable mic just to share some thoughts from my experiences as a collector at this moment in time. And ladies and gents, it's time for me to talk about G.I. Joe Classified Series, Lara Croft. My man Will, regular around these parts, cherished member of the MoDXtra Games and Collectibles viewing community, popped this note on. It's not the day after Will, but I hope this will suffice because the long and the short of it is I think it's a lovely G.I. Joe Classified Series figure, but I've not made a pre-order. And this is frankly a price issue. I think Lara Croft has a price problem. But of course, as with all things, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So let me start by just sort of rolling back the narrative here. When we first saw the digital render during Yojo June, I said that the Lara Croft looks pretty decent actually, but I have no nostalgic connection to the character. I wasn't much of a Tomb Raider player back in the day. It's not a childhood favourite character for me, but I think it's an interesting crossover. I could see how she would fit in with my G.I. Joe Classified Series collection, and I may or may not go in on her. Then last week on Thursday, was it Thursday? Yeah, Thursday, there was the panel took place at San Diego Comic-Con, and then they did the video on the Hasbro Pulse channel. I saw the Lara Croft, and when I recorded my kind of summary of the new release announcements, my review of the preview that took place, I was like, do you know what, actually, seeing the Shooting the Galaxy pictures, seeing the in-hand photos from the Hasbro breakfast, and seeing, more info and a better look at San Diego Comic-Con, I actually think I might go for Lara Croft. I've been turned around, despite the fact that she's not a nostalgic character that I have a deep love for. I think there's a lot to enjoy, and I'll probably pre-order it. So I'd recorded that video before the pre-order had opened up. And in fact, I was editing said video. I was editing my commentary video on the new reveals when the pre-order went live. And I stopped editing, jumped over to Hasbro Pulse, went to put the pre-order in, and stopped in my tracks because I saw this price. And just for the purposes of the rest of the video, I want to contextualize that by making sure that you guys in North America understand that that price here in the United Kingdom is the equivalent at the current exchange rate of about $64, give or take. When I checked it last week, it was more like 63. It's up to 64 right now. Obviously, exchange rates fluctuate. And this is what then prompted this post, where I was just like, okay, what the hell's going on here? You know what I mean? And at that point, I didn't make the pre-order. I paused. I had price shock in the moment. I wanted to get the video finished and edited. This was 10 o'clock at night here now in the UK. I always end up recording and editing my videos late into the night, and I'd work the next day and blah, blah, blah. So I cracked on, and I thought I'll sit on it for a bit. I'll ruminate, maybe even sleep on it, and I'll get round to it later today or tomorrow. But it didn't matter. The procrastination that price shock created meant that I was too late because the decision was taken out of my hands everywhere here in the UK. And also, I think I'm getting the sense from North America as well, because I'm seeing the social posts. It had, the decision had been taken out of my hand because it had sold out everywhere where all good toys are sold, which is something else, another nuance, another part of the narrative here that I want to talk about. The short of it all is that, yeah, I've not pre-ordered it. I feel like she's too expensive. But let's circle back round to my comment before, where I think this is a little bit more nuanced than just my price shock. See, I don't think I'm necessarily alone on this. When I made my post to say that I was a bit shocked by the price, and then sort of floating around on the likes of Reddit and Facebook and Instagram and so on and so forth, I got the sense that my sentiment was largely agreed with, that we're all sort of generally a consensus in the community that the price is too high, but then views sort of differ about the value, or whether that price is justified. That idea of, I love the figure, I think it's got a lot to offer, but I don't love the price. I think the distinction being is that I'm seeing a lot of people saying, yeah, despite the price, I did still go in on it. Bearing in mind that in North America, even if you're in a state with the highest rate of sales tax, you're still floating at around a good sort of $13, $14 less than the price here in the United Kingdom. I believe it's the same in places like Europe and Canada as well, actually, looking at some of the comments that I've heard from other members of the viewing community. So the question then is, why is the price so high? And is it high? realistically. I mean, we're certainly operating on a comparison point that is the standard G.I. Joe classified retro card back price we've come to get used to, which over here is generally around £26-27. And so there's also, it's the price shock, but it's also the price shock in the sense of the opportunity cost, because when we see how much that's costing and we compare it then to what the sort of standard price for G.I. Joe Classified Series Retro back has been, you can make the argument, say, well, a couple of quid more and I could buy 2 classified retro card backs, or a couple of quid more, and it's basically that single figure is the same price as, say, the Scarlet and Shebang 2-pack, or the Red Dog and Taurus, not Red Dog and Taurus, sorry, Red Dog and Slaughter, or the Taurus and no, oh god, it was Red Dog and Taurus, and it was Slaughter and Mercer. You know, those 2-packs that I recently bought are only what, a couple, they were like just over 50 quid, so only a few quid more. I mentioned about I could get almost 2 Fresh Monkey Fiction figures for that price. And my man D70, we had a bit of a chat over on Instagram, and he was saying, yeah, but for him, his perspective is that Lara Croft is a new figure. She's got a load of accessories. It's unique. It's the nostalgia factor, etc., etc., etc. Whereas 2 Fresh Monkey Fiction army builders is loads of reused parts. Again, I think it's more nuanced than that, because Fresh Monkey Fiction, the paint applications, the sculpting detail, things like the washes and the dry brushes to give it more depth. I think the quality of the additional accessories is better with the Gridiron accessories partnership and so on and so forth. So, it then starts to boil down to not just price, but value, how you picture value. And in the first instance, a lot of people around them out on the socials I saw were sort of explaining the inflated cost, like, it's a smaller production run of a figure. The license for Lara Croft then is probably quite expensive, because you're not making up the license cost like you might do with Black Series, where you're doing it over a large amount of product, over waves of figures, or like you do in Marvel Legends and so on and so forth, because it's just a single release. So the licensing cost kind of came up as a possibility, is why it was so highly priced. The unique tooling, the fact that it is a smaller production run, or at least it appears to be a smaller production run with how quickly the pre-orders sold out. The foil card back to make it more deluxe and special for the in-box collectors who like to put their retro card backs on display and on the wall and such like. The accessory selection, she's got quite a lot of accessories, and some of those accessories are unique to her as a character. I know there's been some folks who talked about, well, there's a lot of reuse accessories, but there are some in there that are unique to her as well. And even, some perspectives I've seen out and about there that is just simply explain the increased cost by saying, well, because they can. Because they know that there's a certain added value with the nostalgia, it's a unique character, and that the target audience isn't just G.I. Joe Classified collectors, but is also Tomb Raider fans, it's also, video game fans, it's also broadly action figure collectors who might not normally buy a G.I. Joe Classified, but would get a Lara Croft figure because she's an iconic character, and that we're not necessarily paying the higher cost because of anything about the tooling or the number of accessories or whatever, but simply Hasbro can, because they're leveraging, they're leveraging the character desirability. We're paying for the character desirability. So, when breaking it down, it is a fact that it's an expensive figure. And of course, internationally, like here over in the UK, it's even more expensive. The price is so inflated. That's a fact. But what we value as collectors, and what we would perceive as value within the set, differs. It's subjective. It differs from collector to collector. So the nostalgia factor, I'm not a Tomb Raider guy. She's not a beloved childhood character for me. It might be different for someone else who she is a beloved character. Like Tomb Raider's been relatively ill-served in the action figure space for a couple of years now. And so the inflated price is worth that new character, valued character, nostalgically valued character. It's the first cool Lara Croft in years. The fact that she's unique as well in terms of the sculpt, the book, the tooling, etc., is, again, a piece of added value that some collectors would value higher than others. Like for me, I don't value that as much against the price that they put her out at compared to how others might value it. Completionists, of course, got to catch them all. They value the acquisition of the character in order to be a completionist more than, say, others could do. And then, the fact that it started selling out, it's the old FOMO paradox that our price sensitivity and our price shock at seeing how much it costs starts to shift because the perception of value alters as it starts to sell out and as scarcity enters into the narrative. The panicked pre-orders that I don't want to be filled with regret 4, 5, 6 months from now when it starts shipping and I didn't make the pre-order. Or on the flip side, where that sense of regret that you did pre-order it and that you're now on the hook for the, you laid a deposit down, now you're on the hook for the rest of the price, and you realise how much it actually costs. So the value, the perceived value alters and did alter, I think, because of the way the scarcity of it all started to happen, which, cynics and skeptics like me are always a little bit twitchy about, because I wonder if this is intentional scarcity. Limited production runs were intentionally done as a means of justifying the higher price, as a means of manipulation to alter perceived value, and then actually down the line, she'll start turning up more readily available. So whereas I was happy to procrastinate over the pre-order, and then when the decision was taken out of my hands because it was selling out everywhere here in the UK, I was like, well, okay, there you go. The fate of the world, the karma has come and made the decision for me, and that's fine. But for some, as that scarcity increased, the desire to make sure that you're not going to be a victim of FOMO in 6 months' time, and filled with regret that you didn't make a pre-order, influenced your decision and influenced your view of the value of the figure. And that's fine too. I'm not bagging on people. I've definitely done that myself before. There's no doubt about it. So, I'm not throwing shade here. I do it too. Just in this instance, the price shock was enough for me that didn't happen. Now, one other part of my sort of decision-making process when it comes to assessing price versus value is, of course, the fact that I've got a YouTube channel that talks about action figures. And there is a small part of me that sometimes considers, well, would this be a good review for the channel? Would this be something my audience would expect? And I do, and I have on the odd occasion, although not a great deal. I must admit, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I'm pretty good at not making decisions around the channel need. I tend to buy and review what I would have bought anyway. But it does creep in every now and again. It does sort of skirt around the edges of the decision to say, well, is this something that my audience would like to see a review from me about? Is this something that, would help boost viewing figures? You can't help it. As much as we say we don't, you can't help it. And I know for a fact, looking across other toy tubers from big to small, there are people who do that are picking up figures and doing reviews on figures, regardless of the price, regardless of the value. But, well, I suppose because their perceived value is what it means for their channel rather than what it means for their collection. And in this instance, I was very much like, no, I can't make a decision based on the channel here. I've got to think about it in terms of what it means for the collection. And honestly, I do try and do that. I do try and kind of shut down the toy tuber itch sometimes, because you do end up just buying loads of crap then that you don't really love or value the way that you should do in your collection. It just ends up filling up space because you wanted to get the video out. And at the minute, in the way that the certainly the G.I. Joe classified toy tubing, if you're not first, you're last. I can't compete with the pace at which the likes of Sharky and Bobby Bees are getting their reviews out. And so, making a decision based on the channel and having perceived value based on what it means for my channel isn't a part of the narrative, really. But I could see where it might have been for some. Not that I think there's that many toy tubers out there that it contributed to the selling out. I'm just kind of talking about it from my view as a toy tuber. So there you go, Will, and others who are interested. In response to your question, no, I didn't go in on the pre-order. I felt like the price was too high compared to the value that I perceived in the set. However, I have seen comments and people across socials and commenting on my post and on my video where they agree the sentiment is the same. The price, they don't love the cost, but there's something about the figure that meant they had enough perceived value to justify the cost, whether it's because it's a new character, whether it's because of the deluxe packaging, whether it's because of the added accessories, the head swap, the unique accessories in addition to the reuse accessories in there, and the kind of opportunity cost in terms of what they wouldn't buy in lieu of picking up a Tomb Raider was acceptable to them, and the fact that in the mix there was Tomb Raider fans and such like, but it just didn't win me over in that way. So I went through a bit of a roller coaster journey on Lara Croft because I was like, nah, maybe not. Then I was like, oh yeah, look at this, it looks really good actually, I think I will, to Absolutely not. Jesus Christ. And then, like I say, the decision was taken out of my hands anyway, even if I had wavered. But the price shock, yeah, the price shock. I mean, if G.I. Joe Classified had always been priced at, 45, 46 quid, the price shock wouldn't have been as much as it was. But then I'd have never got into the line in the first place, because while I think it's an excellent line at the price band it's been at, I don't think it's an excellent line necessarily at that price. I think that's across the Rubicon. That's where you start getting into your kind of, your NECA spaces where you've got a lot more sculpting detail, or your Savage Crucible spaces, or I could import Skeletron, and build out my Red Shadow, my Fate Red Shadow army or whatever. I'm not sure I'm articulating that very well, but I feel like that's the Rubicon to cross. So would I be as price shocked if they'd always been that much? Well, no, of course I wouldn't. And certainly there's folks out there who spend an awful lot of money on things like Mafex imports and SH figure arts and stuff. And for them, I suppose the argument would be, well, yes, I spend that much on my action figures, but I also think the quality and the perceived value is higher than a G.I. Joe Classified, because that's always been the point, is that I've felt like the value's been good at the price banding that they're at. But at the end of the day, I could get 2 Jada Street Fighter figures for the price of 1 Tomb Raider, G.I. Joe Classified crossover Tomb Raider. And when you're talking about value in that particular price bracket, well, Jada Street Fighter have got an awful lot in the pro column, in the plus column, compared to G.I. Joe Classified on that front. So, yeah. Lara Croft, do not watch this space, because there is very unlikely, it's not going to happen, at least as the way it stands at this minute, that there'll be a Lara Croft Tomb Raider review appearing on the MoDXtra Games and Collectibles channel. The price shock was just too much for me. So there you go. Now, of course, the last point on this is the concern, the worry that I have that this becomes the new normal. If we are going to take the cynical, skeptical track and say, well, they've charged this much because they can, and then the fact that they've charged this much has been reinforced, that we've kind of reinforced that behaviour because so many of the community did justify it and did go in on it. Is this going to influence future financial decisions from, the spreadsheet keepers in Hasbro as to what the price of one of these action figures should be, and that it'll eventually creep up to become the new normal? And at that point, they'll have priced me out. They'll have priced me out. It will be the end of my collecting of G.I. Joe Classified, and it will be probably the end of this channel as well, because I won't be able to review stuff. So there is a little note of anxiety that, with the way things are at the cost of living crisis right now, that the thing that gives me escapism and joy away from the pains of the cost of living crisis is actually becoming a part of the cost of living crisis problem itself, because the prices are creeping up and I can't afford to engage with the hobby. Time will tell on that one. I'd like to think right now it's just because it's a deluxe figure, it's a crossover figure. They have probably price gouged it a bit, knowing that it's going to appeal outside of just the standard G.I. Joe Classified series audience, and that it won't become the new normal. But, Mr. Stevie was saying that his favourite crossover's yet to come, and is that going to be a Classified figure? Is that going to be 45 quid? Is it going to be awesome? And they're going to do like a really great James Bond, and I'm not going to be able to afford that too. It's tricky. It's tricky because, that big picture stuff around, well, the hobby that helps me escape from the shit of the mortgage going up and the shit of the gas and electricity going up, and gives me a little bit of pleasure and joy and escapism, is becoming unaffordable too, and that would be a real shame. That's very sad, for anybody in any hobby, not just action figures. Maybe hockey players are finding the price of hockey sticks getting too much. I don't know. So there we are, folks. That's where I'm at. Does Hasbro have a price problem with the Lara Croft? Well, yes, I think they do, but no, actually they don't, because it sold out and people bought it. So from their point of view, it's not an issue, is it? But always interested to hear your thoughts. So, as always, I'll invite you to the comments down below. Tell me what you think. Certainly no need to jump in there and justify yourself either. If you have bought it, I'm not banging on you. If you can afford it and you've got the money to spend, and the character value as weighs against that price, against that cost in your mind, okay, then you do you. No problem at all on my front, but I was asked specifically whether I'd gone in on it, and those are my thoughts. So there we are. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit all the buttons that help a YouTuber out. Otherwise, take it easy. Have yourselves a great day, and swing back around again for another video sometime soon. It'd be my pleasure to have you. All right, take it easy, folks.